She had been erased with the stroke of a pen. In a world lit by crystal chandeliers and ruled by names whispered in boardrooms, Elena Roth vanished from the guest list, but not from the story. Her husband thought a missing seat at a gala could unmake a legacy, that a woman could be boxed into the margins of a night she helped finance. But some women don't disappear. They detonate. When the ballroom doors blew open, it wasn't just an entrance. It was a reckoning, draped in midnight silk, armored in platinum, and trailed by silence that roared louder than applause. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. He thought he had won in a world of glittering facades and whispered power plays. Benjamin Cross committed the ultimate betrayal, erasing his wife Elena from the most important night of his career. He wanted her invisible, a ghost in their polished life, while he basked in the spotlight with his new muse. But he made a fatal error. He never asked where her money came from. He thought he was closing a door, but all he did was give her the grandest entrance imaginable. What happens when the woman you tried to silence owns the stage you're standing on? The air in the Cross residence was like that in a museum, beautiful, temperature-controlled, and utterly devoid of life. It clung to the oversized abstract paintings and the sterile, white concrete floors of their modern villa perched above San Diego Bay. For Elena, the silence was the loudest thing in her life. It was a constant humming reminder of the chasm that had opened between her and her husband, Benjamin Cross. They were, by all accounts, a power couple. Benjamin was a senior partner at the elite legal firm Clayton Moore & Klein, a man whose ambition was as sharp and tailored as his custom suits. Elena, to the outside world, was the elegant, unassuming wife, the perfect hostess, the quiet supporter. It was a role she had once played with love, but now wore like a lead cloak. The change had been gradual, a slow erosion. Over the past few years, Benjamin's successes had inflated his ego until it filled every room, leaving no space for her. He had started to see her not as a partner, but as an accessory, a beautiful, well-bred ornament to be displayed at fundraisers and board dinners. He had forgotten the woman he married, the sharp-minded software architect with fire in her eyes. He had quite deliberately stopped asking about her work. "It's just some computer nerd stuff, isn't it?" he'd once said with a dismissive wave of his hand when a friend inquired. "Keeps her busy." Elena hadn't corrected him. She had let him believe it. Let him think her company, Baylight Technologies, was a little hobby, a passion project she tinkered with from her garden studio. She never told him when she secured her third round of funding, when her user base crossed 10 million, or when Amazon had tried to buy her out for a figure that would have made his annual salary look like a rounding error. Her silence was her sanctuary, the one part of her life he hadn't yet managed to tarnish with his condescension. The beginning of the end came on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. Elena was in her office, a sleek, minimalist space that contrasted sharply with the rest of the villa, deep in a conference call with her development team in Amsterdam. They were finalizing the rollout of Polaris, a revolutionary data encryption software that was already making waves in the tech industry. "The preliminary reports from the beta testers are flawless, Elena," her lead engineer, Damien Kerr, said, his voice buzzing with excitement through the speaker. "The security protocols are holding. We've thrown everything we have at it, and it's a fortress." A rare, genuine smile touched Elena's lips. "Excellent work, Damien. Let's stick to the schedule. I want to be ready for the Q4 launch." She ended the call with a feeling of pride and accomplishment, a warm current in her veins. This was hers. She had built this from the ground up, fueled by late nights, relentless determination, and an unshakable belief in her vision. The door to her office slid open without a knock. Benjamin stood there holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. He didn't acknowledge her call or the schematics glowing on her screen. His focus was solely on the invitation in his hand. "It's here," he announced, his voice booming with self-importance. "The invitation to the Crescent Light Foundation Gala." Elena swiveled in her chair. The Crescent Light Foundation was the city's most prominent children's charity, and its annual gala was the absolute pinnacle of the social calendar. It was a night of immense networking, where fortunes were donated and careers were made. For Benjamin, whose firm represented the foundation, it was the most important night of the year. "That's wonderful, dear," she said, her voice even. He strode into the room, placing the envelope on her desk, but kept his hand firmly on it. This year is different. I'm on the host committee. Frederick Langston himself told me my speech this year is crucial for locking in the Marston account. He was practically vibrating with nervous energy and ambition. Everything has to be perfect. Elena looked at the invitation. Mr. Benjamin Cross and guest, it read, not Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin Cross. A small detail, perhaps a simple oversight by the event planners, but in the context of their marriage, it felt like a paper cut. Small, but sharp and stinging. And guest? She asked, raising a delicate eyebrow. Benjamin had the decency to look momentarily flustered. It's a standard format they use, darling. Don't be pedantic. Obviously, you're my guest. He said the word guest as if he were bestowing a great honor upon her. As if she were a stranger he was magnanimously agreeing to escort. He didn't see the flicker of hurt in her eyes. Or if he did, he chose to ignore it. He was too busy admiring his own reflection in the darkened glass of her monitor. I'll need you to wear the sapphire dress, he continued, already planning the evening like a military campaign. The one we bought in Madrid, and please, let's have your hair done professionally. No tight bun, something soft, approachable. Approachable, Elena repeated. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Yes, and darling, he added, his tone shifting to one of strained patience. When we're there, perhaps you could mingle less, or at least stick to the other wives. Last year, you got into that dreadfully boring conversation about, what was it, algorithmic ethics, with that tech billionaire? He gave a small shake of his head. It was terribly off-putting. People don't want to talk about business at these things. The man he was referring to, a titan of European tech, had specifically sought her out after hearing whispers about her work. The conversation had led to a lucrative consulting contract for Baylight Technologies. But Benjamin saw none of that. He only saw his wife failing to perform her designated role as a silent, smiling prop. I understand, she said, her voice calm as a still lake layered over a raging current. I'll do my best not to be off-putting. Satisfied, Benjamin finally released the invitation and turned to leave. Good, this is my night, Elena. Our future at the firm, my path to a named partnership. It's all riding on this. I can't afford any distractions. As the door slid shut, Elena stared at the invitation. Mr. Benjamin Cross and guest. A guest in her own life, an accessory to his. The warmth from her successful call with Damien had vanished, replaced by a familiar, chilling cold. She looked at the reflection in the monitor, past Benjamin's fleeting image, and saw herself. She saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but underneath it, a flicker of the fire he thought he had extinguished. He had called the evening his night. He had said he couldn't afford distractions. He had no idea, she thought, a grim sense of resolve beginning to form. Just how big of a distraction she could be. The gilded cage had become a prison, and she was finally ready to find the key. She just didn't realize that Benjamin was about to hand it to her himself. Benjamin Cross felt a surge of triumphant power as he walked down the hallowed halls of Clayton, Moore & Klein. The rich walnut-paneled walls, adorned with oil portraits of stern-faced founders, seemed to nod in silent approval. He was a man on the ascent, and the crescent-like gala was to be his coronation, but a nagging unease picked at the edges of his confidence. Elena, she was becoming unpredictable. Her quietness, which he had once mistaken for compliance, now felt like a form of judgment. The way she looked at him over dinner, her eyes unreadable, made his skin crawl. He hated that he couldn't decipher her, that a part of her remained stubbornly her own, and her so-called hobby, Baylight Technologies, was a source of constant low-grade irritation. He didn't understand it, so he dismissed it. It was easier than admitting his wife might be brilliant in a field he couldn't comprehend. Worse, it reminded him of how little control he had over certain parts of her world. A world she built in silence, a fortress of code and innovation he couldn't breach with charm or strategy. There was a time when her admiration anchored him, made him feel seen. Now, that gaze held distance, quietly questioning, dangerously knowing. He felt small in those moments, and he despised it. His unease crystallized into a concrete plan. During a lunch meeting, 2 weeks before the gala, at the Bellamy Room, a high-end steakhouse where West Coast deals were sealed over $120 ribeyes, he met with Serafina Lane. Serafina was a junior associate at the firm, but she moved with the predatory grace of a panther. She had sharp, intelligent eyes, a razor wit, and an ambition that rivaled Benjamin's own. She had attached herself to him, ostensibly as a mentee, but the dynamic was far more charged. She flattered his ego, hung on his every word, and made him feel like the titan of industry he so desperately wanted to be. She was everything he thought he wanted: ambitious, focused on his world, and utterly unimpressed by anything outside of it. "Frederick Langston was singing your praises in the partners' meeting this morning," Serafina said, leaning forward, her voice a low purr. "He said the Marston account is practically yours." "If the gala goes smoothly, it will be," Benjamin replied, straightening his tie. "There's just the matter of the guest list." Serafina took a delicate sip of her wine. "Oh, is there a problem?" Benjamin hesitated, feigning casualness. "Elena, she hasn't been herself lately, very wrapped up in her little projects. I worry she'll be a distraction. You know how she can be, talking about things no one understands. It's not the right image." Serafina's expression was a masterpiece of calculated sympathy. "That must be so difficult for you, Benjamin, to be on the cusp of something so great and have to worry about your partner reflecting the right image." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "The invitation did say 'and guest,' didn't it? That's rather flexible." Her voice was velvet-wrapped steel, offering him a knife while pretending it was a handkerchief. A seed of an idea, dark and treacherous, began to sprout in Benjamin's mind. He could just uninvite her. But the fallout, the questions, the sheer domestic unpleasantness of it was a deterrent. "It would be complicated," he said, testing the waters. Serafina's smile was sharp. "Complications can be managed. Discretion is a lawyer's greatest tool." She leaned in closer, her scent expensive and intoxicating, filling his senses. "Who's the gala coordinator? Melissa Kramer, isn't it?" "She's a friend of my cousin's. A single phone call, a plausible reason, a sudden illness perhaps, or a prior, unavoidable commitment she simply forgot about." She tilted her head, her tone honeyed. "It would be a shame for her to feel pressured to attend, if she's not feeling up to it. It would be a kindness, really. You'd be sparing her an evening she clearly wouldn't enjoy." Serafina was a master at reframing betrayal as consideration. She was giving him not just a plan, but a justification. He wouldn't be a villain. He would be a thoughtful husband. The idea took root and grew its thorny vines wrapping around his ambition. The vision of the gala solidified in his mind, him at the podium, powerful and articulate. Serafina at his table, looking up at him with undisguised admiration. And Elena? Elena would be at home. Out of sight, out of mind, tending to her whatever it was. The next day, Benjamin made the call. He waited until Elena had left for a rare off-site meeting. She hadn't bothered to explain, and he hadn't asked. He closed the door to his study, his heart hammering against his ribs, a strange mixture of guilt and exhilarating freedom coursing through him. He dialed the number for the Crescent Light Foundation's event office. "Melissa Kramer, please." Benjamin cross-calling. A moment later, Melissa's cheerful voice came on the line. "Benjamin, how lovely to hear from you. We're all so excited for the gala. Your support has been incredible." "Of course, Melissa. Happy to help," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Listen, I'm calling about a small, rather delicate matter. Regarding the guest list, there seems to have been a slight miscommunication on my end. My wife, Elena, unfortunately, she's going to be unable to attend." "Oh no, is everything all right?" Benjamin let out a perfectly crafted sigh. "She's been terribly run down lately, pushing herself too hard with a personal project. I've been insisting she take it easy, and she's finally agreed. She feels dreadful about it, of course, but her health must come first. She sends her deepest apologies." "Oh, the poor dear." "Of course, we completely understand," Melissa said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Please send her our very best." "So the ticket will just be for you then, or will you be bringing a guest in her place?" This was the moment, the final turn of the screw. "Actually, yes," he said, as if the idea had just occurred to him. "One of my junior associates, Serafina Lane, has been instrumental in preparing the briefing for the Marston account. It would be an invaluable experience for her. Would it be possible to have the name on the seating card changed to hers?" "Not a problem at all, Benjamin. Consider it done. We'll have a place card for Miss Serafina Lane at your table." "Thank you, Melissa. You're a lifesaver. I appreciate your discretion." Of course. He hung up the phone, a wave of relief washing over him. It was done. It had been so easy. He had surgically removed Elena from his big night. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city that felt like it was finally his for the taking. He felt no remorse, only a cold, clean sense of efficiency. He had identified a problem, an unpredictable variable, and he had eliminated it. That evening he was unusually charming to Elena. He brought home a bottle of her favorite Chardonnay and didn't once mention the gala. He asked a perfunctory question about her day, and when she gave a vague answer, he accepted it without pressing. He was playing the part of the loving husband, a final deceptive performance before the curtain rose on his solo act. He watched her across the dinner table, this woman who was now a stranger to him. She was quiet, her thoughts hidden behind a calm facade. He mistook her silence for ignorance. He mistook her poise for passivity. He believed, with the full force of his arrogant heart, that she had no idea what was coming. He was convinced he held all the cards. Blissfully unaware that Elena wasn't just playing a different game. She owned the entire casino. The weeks leading up to the gala were a masterclass in domestic theater. Benjamin was solicitous and attentive in a way he hadn't been for years, a performance of marital bliss designed to mask his treachery. He spoke of the gala with an air of detached importance, never once mentioning her attendance directly. He would talk about his speech, the seating chart, the importance of the Marston account, all while carefully avoiding the one topic that should have been central, what she would be doing that night. Elena, for her part, played her role with unnerving perfection. She listened patiently, offered vague pleasantries, and never ever asked the obvious question, "What time should we leave?" Her silence was a mirror reflecting his deception back at him, but he was too blinded by his own reflection to see it. He believed he was getting away with it. The discovery, when it came, was not a dramatic confrontation. There was no screaming match, no tearful accusation. It was quiet, digital, and devastatingly precise. Elena was in her office a week before the event. She was preparing for a quarterly board meeting for Baylight Technologies. Her company had grown far beyond a hobby. It was now a silent giant in the tech world, with a board of directors composed of some of the sharpest minds in finance and innovation. One of them was Graham Whitaker, a semi-retired venture capitalist in his late 60s, a man with a legendary reputation for spotting talent and a deep-seated belief in ethical business practices. He had been one of Elena's earliest and most ardent supporters. She was reviewing the foundation's public donor information for her own philanthropic planning when she decided to check the gala's website. They often posted a list of the host committee and key attendees to build buzz. She navigated to the page, a knot of cold dread tightening in her stomach. And there it was. Under the heading for Host Committee, Table 1, printed in elegant digital script, Mr. Benjamin Cross, Clayton Moore and Klein, Mrs. Danielle Langston, Mr. Robert Marston, Marston Global, Miss Serafina Lane, Clayton Moore and Klein. Elena stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. Miss Serafina Lane. The name was like a physical blow. It wasn't just that her own name was missing. It was the name that had replaced it. Serafina, the slick, ambitious associate Benjamin had been mentoring. The woman whose perfume sometimes lingered faintly on his shirts. The betrayal was so cold, so clinical, it almost took her breath away. He hadn't just excluded her. He had replaced her. He had traded her in for a newer, more convenient model, an accessory that better matched his ambitions. Her stomach twisted, not just with hurt, but with a visceral sense of erasure. He had rewritten the story of their life together with her as a footnote, easily deleted and quietly discarded. In a room full of power, she was meant to be invisible, absent, unaccounted for. Not even an afterthought, just a strategic omission. The lie about her being unwell, which she now knew he must have told, was the most insulting part. He had painted her as weak and infirm to serve his own purpose. For a long moment she just sat there. The hum of her servers was the only sound in the room. There was a surge of white-hot anger, a primal desire to storm into his study and throw the laptop at his head. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to watch him squirm under the weight of his deceit. But rage, however satisfying, would give him too much. Too much of her voice, too much of her attention. He didn't deserve that anymore. But then another feeling, colder and far more powerful, washed over her. Clarity. This was not just an insult. It was a declaration. He had declared that she was worthless to him. He had declared that their marriage was a sham. He had declared that she was an obstacle to be removed. And in his declaration he had given her a gift. He had given her freedom. The freedom from pretense. The freedom from trying to salvage something that was already dead. The freedom to be exactly who she was, without apology. She didn't confront him. To do so would be to play his game, to descend into a messy emotional battle that he would twist and manipulate. He would call her hysterical, paranoid. He would gaslight her into believing she was overreacting. No. A quiet execution was required. Her fingers, steady and deliberate, moved from the mouse to the telephone. She didn't call Benjamin. She didn't call a divorce lawyer. Not yet. She called Damien Kerr, her brilliant lead engineer and trusted second in command. "Damien," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "cancel my appointments for the rest of the afternoon, and get me Graham Whitaker on the line. Tell him it's about the Crescent Light Foundation." There was a pause on the other end. Damien was perceptive. He knew her tone. This wasn't a business call. This was something else. "Right away, Elena," he said, no questions asked. While she waited for the call to be connected, Elena opened a new file on her computer. It was a secure, encrypted document. The title she typed was simple: Exit Strategy. A few minutes later, her private line buzzed. "Elena, my dear," Graham Whitaker's warm, gravelly voice filled the room. "Damien said it was urgent. Is everything all right with the Polaris launch?" "The launch is perfect, Graham," Elena said, a new steely resolve hardening her voice. "Everything is going according to plan. In fact, I'm thinking of moving up the timeline for our new philanthropic division." "Oh?" Whitaker sounded intrigued. "I thought that was a year away." "Plans change," Elena said, her eyes flicking back to the guest list on her screen. "I've just been made aware of a charity that I believe aligns perfectly with the values of Baylight Technologies." "The Crescent Light Foundation?" "A fine organization," Whitaker agreed. "Old money, a bit stuffy for my taste, but they do good work for the children." "Indeed," Elena said. "Their annual gala is next week. I understand they're still looking for a primary sponsor for the event. I believe they call it the one that gets top billing." Whitaker was silent for a moment, the gears turning in his shrewd mind. He knew Elena. He knew her methodical nature. This was not a whim. "That's a 7-figure commitment, Elena. A very public one." "I'm aware of the cost," she replied, her voice unwavering. "And the visibility is precisely the point, Graham. I need you to make a call. I want Baylight Technologies to be the sole premier sponsor of the Crescent Light Foundation Gala. I want our name on everything, the banners, the program, the stage, and I want it done by the end of business tomorrow. Can you make that happen?" There was another, longer pause. Graham Whitaker didn't get to where he was by being slow on the uptake. He could sense the undercurrents, the unspoken story behind the sudden, massive commitment. He didn't need to know the details. He just needed to know his faith in her was well placed. "Consider it done," he said finally, a hint of admiration in his voice. "They'll be falling over themselves. The publicity for us will be immense." "The publicity is secondary," Elena said softly, her gaze locking onto the name, Serafina Lane. "This is about sending a message, a clear, unambiguous message." She ended the call and leaned back in her chair. The anger had subsided, replaced by an icy calm. Benjamin thought he was closing the door on her. He had no idea. She was about to buy the entire building and evict him. The game had changed. He had made his move. Now she was about to make hers. And it would not be a quiet one. The week that followed was a marvel of silent, furious activity. For Benjamin, it was a week of blissful ignorance. He was consumed with polishing his speech, coordinating with Serafina on talking points, and basking in the preemptive glory of his impending triumph. He saw Elena's quiet demeanor as submission, her long hours in her office as retreating into her irrelevant world. He felt smug, secure, utterly in control. For Elena, it was a week of strategic warfare, waged not with shouting and tears, but with emails, conference calls, and the silent, immense power of her wealth. She was not a woman scorned. She was a CEO executing a hostile takeover of her own narrative. Her first move, after securing the premier sponsorship through Graham Whitaker, Her first move was to place a call to Melissa Kramer at the Crescent Light Foundation. She didn't mention Benjamin. She introduced herself as the CEO of Baylight Technologies, the Gala's new Crescent Light sponsor. Melissa was flabbergasted and ecstatic. "Miss Roth, I'm speechless. Your generosity is simply overwhelming. Mr. Whitaker explained that you wished for us to proceed with the utmost discretion until the night of the gala?" "That is correct, Melissa," Elena said, her voice cool and professional. "My company values privacy. We prefer our work to speak for itself. However, I will be attending, of course. I'll need a seat?" "Of course, absolutely. We'll have you at the head table, naturally," Melissa stammered, frantically scanning her seating chart. "Oh, there seems to be a slight issue. Table 1 is the host committee table, headed by Benjamin Cross of Clayton, Moore & Klein. He has a full guest list." Elena let the silence hang for a beat. "I'm sure Mr. Cross, whose firm does so much work for the foundation, will be more than happy to accommodate the event's primary sponsor. Please add a seat for me at that table. I'm sure you can make it work." Her tone was polite but left no room for negotiation. "Yes, of course, Miss Roth. Right away. One more thing, Melissa," Elena added. "Under no circumstances are you to inform Mr. Cross of this change, or of my company's sponsorship. Let's keep it a surprise for the evening, a little dramatic flair for the big reveal." Melissa, picturing the dramatic moment a mystery benefactor would be revealed, readily agreed. "A wonderful idea, Miss Roth. It'll be the talk of the town." Next, Elena focused on her appearance. Benjamin had wanted her to be soft and approachable. He had requested the sapphire gown from Madrid. Elena sold the dress online that afternoon. Then she placed a call to a private couturière, a woman known for creating gowns that were less dresses and more works of art, armor for the modern woman. "I need something for a gala," Elena explained over video, the designer's chic Parisian studio in the background. "The theme is starlight. I am not a guest, I am the main event. I want to look like I own the stars, not just gaze at them." The designer's eyes lit up with creative fire. They settled on a design of midnight black silk, custom woven with fine platinum-like threads that would catch the light like a constellation. It would be sleeveless, with a sharp architectural neckline that conveyed power, not pliability. It was a gown that would demand attention, a dress that did not ask for permission. To go with it, she commissioned a striking necklace and earrings, not of soft diamonds, but of raw, uncut sapphires set in jagged modern platinum. Beautiful, but with an edge of danger. While her public armor was being forged, Elena worked on her business. She called a special meeting with her PR and marketing team. "The Polaris project is launching in Q4, she told them, her voice ringing with authority. "But I want the pre-launch buzz to begin next week, specifically on the night of the Crescent Light Gala. I want a coordinated press release to go out to every major tech and business journal at precisely 9 p.m. that evening. The release will announce Baylight Technologies as the gala's premier sponsor, and it will also introduce the revolutionary capabilities of Polaris. I want our stock price to be the second biggest story of the night." Her team, sensing the shift in their usually reserved CEO, scrambled to comply, a current of excitement running through them. There was something in her tone, a mixture of finality and purpose, that made even the most seasoned executives sit straighter. This was not just a product launch, it was the unveiling of something much larger. A woman stepping fully into her own spotlight. Finally, she prepared herself. This wasn't just about humiliating Benjamin. That was a byproduct, a satisfying one, but not the ultimate goal. The goal was her liberation. It was about drawing a line so deep and clear in the sand that he could never cross it again. It was about reclaiming her identity, not as Mrs. Benjamin Cross, but as Elena Roth, founder and CEO of a company she had built from nothing. She looked around the guest suite, not a sanctuary, but a chrysalis. The quiet before the emergence. Every detail, from the cold gleam of her earrings to the strategic timing of her arrival, was calibrated to mark a transition, not just for her, but for the world's understanding of who she truly was. On the night of the gala, the penthouse was still and quiet. Benjamin was in their master suite, whistling as he put on his tuxedo. He felt like a king surveying his domain. He had laid his plans perfectly. Elena was in the guest wing, an area of the apartment he hadn't entered in months. Her dress was laid out on the bed, the dark fabric seeming to absorb the light in the room. Her jewelry glittered on the nightstand like captured starlight. Damien had arranged for a private car to collect her. She would not be arriving with the throng of guests, but at the precise moment of the sponsor reveal. At 7, Benjamin knocked on the door of their bedroom, where he assumed she was. "Alina, I'm heading out now. Serafina is meeting me there." He waited, expecting a muffled, disappointed reply. From the other end of the long hallway, behind the closed door of the guest suite, Alina heard him. She stood before a full-length mirror, a vision of midnight and power. She said nothing. Her silence was her answer. Benjamin waited another moment, then shrugged, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "All right then, have a quiet night in," he called out, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He turned and walked out the door, jingling his car keys, leaving his quiet, unassuming wife behind. He felt a pang of something, but he crushed it. It was the price of ambition, he told himself. Elena watched from her window as his car pulled away from the curb, a sleek silver bullet disappearing into the city's glittering chaos. She took a deep, steadying breath. She wasn't being left behind. She was being unleashed. The architect had laid the plans. The trap was set. Now all she had to do was make her entrance. The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel was a symphony of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, cast a dazzling, fractured light over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air hummed with the sound of clinking champagne flutes, discreet gossip, and the powerful, confident laughter of the city's elite. Benjamin Cross moved through the crowd like a conquering hero, with the stunning Serafina Lane on his arm. He felt invincible. Her dress was a vibrant crimson, a stark and deliberate contrast to the soft look he had demanded of Elena. She was a statement piece, and her presence signaled his new direction. "You've truly outdone yourself, Benjamin," said Danielle Langston, the firm's senior partner, clapping him on the back. "A full table. Marston is here. The night is already a success." "We aim to please, Danielle," Benjamin replied smoothly, squeezing Serafina's hand. "We're just getting started." He seated himself at the head table, right in the center, a king holding court. He surveyed the room, a deep sense of satisfaction settling in his chest. Everything was perfect. Every person was in their place. Across the table, Robert Marston, the billionaire CEO whose account he was courting, gave him a cordial nod. Serafina was whispering something amusing to the wife of another partner. There was no sign of Elena, no awkward questions, no prying eyes. He had achieved a clean cut. The evening progressed exactly as he had envisioned. The dinner was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the preliminary speeches were brief and witty. Benjamin felt the warm glow of success and several glasses of champagne. He leaned over to Serafina, his voice a low murmur. "See, what did I tell you? Flawless." "You were right," she whispered back, her eyes gleaming. "No distractions, just you." Finally, the moment arrived. The lights dimmed slightly, and the chairman of the Crescent Light Foundation, a respected philanthropist named Mr. Rav Callum Ames, took to the stage. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome," he began, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "On behalf of the children, we thank you for your incredible generosity. Tonight, we have raised a record-breaking amount, and it is thanks to every single one of you." A polite round of applause rippled through the room. "But every year," Ames continued, his tone becoming more dramatic, "there is one donor whose contribution transcends generosity, one partner who steps up to become the very foundation of this event. Our Crescent Light sponsor." Benjamin sat up straighter, a self-satisfied smile on his face. He knew the usual corporate sponsors. It would be a bank or a major conglomerate. He was ready to lead the applause for whichever faceless entity had paid for the night. "This year," Ames announced, a genuine sense of excitement in his voice, "we were approached by a new partner, a true visionary, a silent force in an industry that is all about noise, a leader who has built an empire not on who they know, but on what they can create." A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the usual script. Benjamin glanced at Serafina, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Serafina shrugged, equally perplexed. "This company and its founder represent the future," Ames boomed. "They represent innovation, integrity, and the brilliant, unstoppable power of a single revolutionary idea. Their work in data security is changing the world, ensuring a safer future for the very children we seek to protect. Benjamin felt a strange, cold prickle on the back of his neck. Data security. Revolutionary idea. The words sounded vaguely, horribly familiar. He looked around the room, expecting to see some well-known tech CEO step into the light. "It is my profound honor," Ames declared, his voice reaching a crescendo, "to announce this year's Crescent Light sponsor, a company that has truly lit up our night, Baylight Technologies." The name hit Benjamin like a physical force. Baylight Technologies, Elena's hobby, her little project. He felt the blood drain from his face. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. Some other Baylight. But Ames wasn't finished. "And please, everyone get on your feet as we welcome the architect of this incredible generosity, the founder and CEO of Baylight Technologies, Miss Elena Roth." As he spoke the name, the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and there she stood. For a moment, there was complete silence. A collective intake of breath from 300 of the city's most powerful people. Elena paused at the threshold, a figure of breathtaking power and control. Midnight. Silk drank the light, platinum threads shimmering like a distant galaxy. The raw sapphires at her throat were not gentle jewels. They were shards of the night sky, bold and defiant. Her hair was swept back in an elegant, severe style that highlighted the determined line of her jaw. She was not soft. She was not approachable. She was magnificent. Then the reaction began. It started at the front, with Graham Whitaker, who was already on his feet, a proud smile on his face. Then others, recognizing the name from burgeoning tech articles, or simply stunned by the sheer drama of the moment, rose to their feet. The applause started, scattered at first, then grew into a deafening, rolling wave of sound. One by one, table by table, the entire room stood. They were not just applauding a donor. They were bearing witness to an arrival. Benjamin remained frozen in his chair, a statue of pure shock. His champagne glass was still in his hand. He stared, his mind unable to process what his eyes were seeing. This was not his wife. This was not the quiet, unassuming woman he had left at home. This was a queen, a titan. Seraphina Lane was equally stunned. Her face, a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Her crimson dress, which had seemed so bold and vibrant moments before, now looked garish and cheap. Next to Elena's celestial elegance, she looked down at herself, then back up toward the inevitable. She looked from Elena to Benjamin and saw the color completely vanish from his face. She had hitched her wagon to a falling star. Elena's eyes scanned the standing crowd, her expression calm and regal. She gave a small, dignified nod of thanks. And then her gaze moved, deliberately, slowly, across the room until it landed on table 1. It swept past the stunned faces of the Langstons and the Marstons, and finally it settled on Benjamin. She did not smile, she did not glare. Her look was one of cool, dispassionate assessment. It was the look a CEO gives a redundant employee. A look that said, "You are irrelevant." As the applause thundered around them, Elena began to walk. She didn't hurry, her steps were measured. Her posture perfect, she moved through the standing crowd, who parted for her as if by royal decree. Her destination was clear, the empty seat at the head table, the seat that Melissa Kramer had, as instructed, squeezed in between Benjamin Cross and Danielle Langston. The seat that now indisputably belonged to her. The sound hit Benjamin first. It wasn't just applause, it was a physical force, a concussive wave of sound that seemed to press him down into his velvet-upholstered chair. 300 of the city's most influential figures were on their feet, their faces turned, not to the stage, but to the double doors at the back of the ballroom. To her, his mind stuttered, refusing to assemble the pieces into the terrifying picture his eyes were showing him. That couldn't be Elena. The Elena he knew was a creature of beige cashmere and quiet compliance. The woman standing in the doorway was a supernova, a celestial event, clad in midnight silk and captured starlight. As she began to walk, Benjamin felt a primal urge to hide, to shrink under the table. Every step she took toward him was a drumbeat, marking the seconds to his own execution. The faces she passed, people he had spent years trying to impress, turned to her with awe. Their expressions a mixture of shock and profound admiration. They were a jury, and with every hand clap, they were delivering their verdict. He was frozen in a nightmare of his own design. The solitary seated fool in a sea of standing worshippers, beside a woman in a garish crimson dress who now looked as lost and terrified as he felt. For Alina, the applause was distant. Noise, the background music to the single clear purpose that propelled her forward. She felt the weight of hundreds of stares, but they did not intimidate her. They fueled her. She had spent years navigating rooms like this as a shadow, her presence acknowledged only through her husband. Tonight, she was not an accessory. She was the focal point. She saw faces she recognized, rival CEOs, banking heirs, society doyens, their mouths slightly agape, their eyes wide. She saw her own reflection, not as Mrs. Cross, but as the powerful, enigmatic Ms. Roth. The identity she had forged in silence was now being revealed in a symphony of acclaim. Her heart beat a steady, resolute rhythm. This was not vengeance. It was a hostile takeover of her own destiny. Her deliberate, unhurried pace brought her to table 1. The air here was thick with unspoken shock. A waiter, his professionalism a small island of calm in the chaos, smoothly pulled out the chair that had been squeezed between Danielle Langston and Benjamin. It was a throne disguised as a seat. Danielle Langston, a woman whose face was usually an inscrutable mask, had recovered first. The flicker of rage in her eyes at being so thoroughly blindsided was quickly replaced by the shrewd calculation of a master strategist. She saw the new chessboard laid out before her. "Elena," she boomed, her voice a theatrical performance of delight as she took Elena's hand, her grip firm, respectful. "My dear, we are speechless, absolutely speechless." She wasn't just being polite, she was publicly aligning herself with a new center of power. "Your generosity, your vision. It is a profound honor to have you with us." Elena inclined her head, accepting the tribute. "Danielle, a pleasure to see you looking so well." Her calm reply was a master stroke, establishing that she was not overwhelmed but entirely in her element. Her tone was crisp but elegant, each word dipped in steel and silk. The kind of grace that didn't need to raise its voice to command a room. She hadn't just arrived, she had taken control. She then turned to Robert Marston, the billionaire whose account Benjamin had been so desperate to land. Marston, a gruff, self-made man with no patience for pretense, was already on his feet, his grin wide and genuine. He admired strength, and he was looking at its personification. "Miss Roth," Marston said, bypassing Langston to shake her hand, "the honor is all mine. I just read a preliminary brief on ethical data encryption last month. I had no idea the mind behind it was right here in our city." He turned to Benjamin, chuckling. "Benjamin, you sly dog, you never mentioned your wife was a titan." The comment was ostensibly a compliment, but the undertone was sharp, questioning. Benjamin felt a flush of heat crawl up his neck. He had rehearsed for admiration, not scrutiny. And now every eye that turned his way carried the weight of a question he couldn't answer. He saw a lifeline and grabbed at it with clumsy desperation. He pushed himself to his feet, trying to arrange his face into a mask of proud surprise and delight. "Darling," he exclaimed, his voice a strained, unnatural imitation of joy. "What a surprise. You should have told me you were planning something so spectacular. I was so worried when you said you felt unwell." He reached for her arm, attempting to reclaim his role as the husband, the one who was in on the secret. Elena moved her arm just slightly, an almost imperceptible motion, but enough that his hand grasped only empty air. She looked at him, then truly looked at him, and her gaze was as cold and clear as Arctic ice. It was not anger, not even disappointment. It was detachment. The look one gives a sealed file that no longer needs reviewing. "Unwell?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft, yet it cut through the lingering buzz at the table. "No, Benjamin. I believe the word you're looking for is underestimated. But I've never felt better." The public rejection, the quiet correction of his lie, landed like a perfectly thrown dagger. Benjamin flinched. His pathetic smile dissolved. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. Having dismissed him, Elena's gaze swept past him and settled, for the first time, on Serafina Lane. Serafina, who had been frozen in a state of horrified paralysis, visibly shrank under the cool, appraising look. It was not a look of anger or jealousy, it was a look of utter indifference, the kind one gives to a piece of lint on an otherwise perfect garment. Elena did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She gestured, almost imperceptibly, to a passing captain. "Excuse me," she said, her tone one of polite concern. "I believe there has been a seating error. This young lady seems to have lost her way from the junior associates section, over there. She gestured vaguely toward the back of the ballroom. Perhaps you could help her find her correct table. The humiliation was absolute, a masterpiece of public execution. She hadn't called Serafina a homewrecker, or a schemer. She had done something far worse. She had rendered her completely and utterly insignificant, a lost intern, a non-entity. Serafina's face, already flushed, turned a deep, blotchy scarlet. Her eyes darted to Benjamin, pleading for him to say something, to defend her, to do anything. But Benjamin was a hollowed-out man, incapable of defending himself, let alone her. He just stared at his plate, his world collapsing inward. With a choked sob, Serafina grabbed her ridiculously small, ridiculously expensive clutch bag. Her hands trembled. She pushed her chair back so violently it nearly toppled. Without a single word, she turned and fled, weaving through the tables in a walk of pure shame. The whispers and stares of the city's elite followed her like vultures. Benjamin watched her go, another pillar of his fantasy world turning to sand. And in that precise moment, as if orchestrated by a vengeful god of timing, a new sound filled the room. It started as a few isolated vibrations, then spread, a digital wave washing over the ballroom. It was the synchronized buzz and chime of hundreds of smartphones receiving a notification. At exactly 9 p.m., Elena's pre-timed press release had gone live. Danielle Langston, ever the professional, discreetly pulled her phone from her clutch. Her eyes scanned the screen, and her jaw tightened. She read the headline from the Wall Street Journal. Baylight Technologies' secret CEO, Elena Roth, revealed in seven-figure philanthropic coup, announces revolutionary Athena encryption suite. The story wasn't just about the Gala. It was about a massive corporate move, a disruption in the tech world. Langston looked at the stock futures for Baylight Technologies, already spiking in after-hours trading. She looked at Elena, who was calmly sipping her water, a portrait of serene control. And then she looked at the pathetic, sweating man beside her. Her partner, who had not only hidden this immense asset from the firm, but had actively tried to discard her in favor of a junior associate on the most important night of the year. The sheer monumental stupidity of it was breathtaking. Langston leaned toward Benjamin, her voice no longer booming, but a low, lethal hiss that was far more terrifying. "Benjamin, my office, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp." She paused, letting the dread build. "Don't bother bringing a briefcase. Just bring your resignation." Before Benjamin could even process the words that had just ended his career, Mr. Finch was back at the podium, his face beaming. "And now," he announced joyfully, "we would like to invite our Crescent Light sponsor, the brilliant Miss Elena Roth, to say a few words." The spotlight swung back, illuminating Elena. As she rose, the applause was even louder this time, thunderous and sustained. She moved past her husband without a single glance, her gown shimmering as she ascended the few steps to the stage. She was no longer just a donor. She was a visionary, a leader, the undisputed star of the night. She reached the podium, and the room fell silent. She looked out over the sea of faces, her gaze poised and confident. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and resonant. "They say that starlight is a message from the past, a glimmer from something that has been burning brightly for millions of years, even if we've only just noticed its light. In my world, technology, we don't look to the past, we build the future. We build foundations strong enough to support the grandest of structures. We create fortresses to protect what is most valuable." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room before landing briefly, meaningfully on the wreckage at table 1. Sometimes the most revolutionary potential lies hidden, overlooked, or simply underestimated. But true value, like a star, cannot be hidden forever. Eventually, its light reaches you. My company, Baylight Technologies, is honored to support the Crescent Light Foundation, which does the vital work of ensuring that the potential within every child is seen, nurtured, and given a chance to shine. Thank you. It was short, it was elegant, and for Benjamin, every word was a perfectly aimed blow. She had spoken of building fortresses, of hidden value, of the folly of overlooking true potential. She had delivered his eulogy without ever speaking his name. The standing ovation that followed was explosive. Benjamin remained seated, a ghost at the feast. The whispers and pointed looks were now unbearable. He couldn't breathe. He pushed himself to his feet, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. He turned his back on the stage where his wife was being celebrated and began his own walk of shame. No one tried to stop him. No one seemed to notice him at all. He stumbled out of the grand ballroom, the golden light and the sound of her triumph spilling out behind him, before the heavy doors swung shut, plunging him into the quiet, indifferent hallway. He was alone. The silence that greeted him was 1,000 times louder than the applause. He had wanted to erase her, but in the end, he had only succeeded in erasing himself. That wasn't just a story about revenge, it was a story about reclamation. Elena didn't just expose her husband's betrayal, she reclaimed her name, her power, and her narrative in front of the entire world. She showed everyone that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. How many times have we felt underestimated or silenced by those who should have been our biggest supporters? This story is for anyone who has ever been made to feel small, proving that the best response to being erased is to become unforgettable. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, something in this story, some piece of Elena's quiet strength or Benjamin's unraveling, has touched you. And that means you're one of us. You understand that silence doesn't mean weakness, and that grace under fire isn't surrender, it's strategy. Elena Roth's journey reminds us that reclamation is one of the most powerful things a person can do. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her value. She didn't fight fire with fire, she outshined it. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, said author Penny Reed. Elena learned that, and perhaps tonight, you did too. In a world that often tries to define us by who we're with or what we're allowed to be, Elena's story teaches this. Your identity, your voice, your worth do not require permission. Maybe you've been dismissed, minimized, or told your dreams were too much. Maybe someone tried to sideline you. If that resonates, remember, you are not invisible. You're just not in your final form yet. So take this story with you. Let it fuel your next step, however quiet or bold it may be. You don't need revenge to rise. You only need truth, strategy, and a little starlight of your own. And if you found value here, if you felt seen or stirred, I'd be so grateful if you liked, shared, or subscribed to the channel. This community is for those rewriting their narratives, page by powerful page. Thank you for being here. You are not alone.